out front.
I bet if we do like one circle really
Like a
quick, see
swivel
who's here.
around.
Yeah.
Twirl this around.
There we go.
Oh goodness, I don't photograph
Multiple people. We can digitalize, put like 15 more people in.
Yeah.
it. 3 of each of us.
Oh look, there's the Secretary of Education.
What, did she do this at Fenway Stadium?
Obama in the back.
Oh.
60,000 people came, wow!
I know, it's not, I'm gonna put it down in the chair so that it's actually,
Oh, and I don't
a
know
little
how
too
much
high.
it'll be. Does someone want to, Matt, do you want to be in control of the filming? And so that if I happen to run around to click or, I don't know. Is that, okay, I guess that works. Just when we get to like question and answers and stuff.
Take it up and put it there.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea. That's perfect. Look at my outfit.
I love it.
My mom sent me the sweater just for today.
Awesome.
Okay. So, my presentation, my master's thesis is called Transformative Teaching, Empowering Youth Intelligence and Character Development Through Discovery. I'll just give you a little background first. I started this thesis when I read a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that said, intelligence plus character, that's the true goal of education. And I started thinking a lot about character and how we can measure it and how we can develop character and what role the schools would play in that. So I developed this chart basically starting with understanding. When students understand a concept, that builds their intelligence, okay? And then I have intelligence plus an intellectual experience. An experience using that intelligence or applying that intelligence produces an educated perspective. This develops enlightened opinion, and that catalyzes personality development, which directly influences character transformation. I read a book for one of my classes called The Art of Possibility, and this is a quote, "In the realm of possibility, we gain our knowledge by invention. These are the moments when we forget ourselves and become part of all beings." I picked this quote because it sort of represents what character looks like, how character works. So, statements on character, and these are my words. If life is a network, then character is what connects us. Character is a foundation for human connection. It's how we relate to one another and work together using our individually acquired intelligence. Basically, character just guides who we are. We learn something and then we use it, and that develops our character. We negotiate our intelligence with our character. So how do we help students build character? There's 2 concepts on how to teach character. Gabriel Campari, philosophy, Campari, I think it's French. He's an educational psychologist, and he wrote about 2 different kinds of teaching for character. One is direct, and one is indirect. And he says when you teach character directly, such as saying to a class, treat others the way you want to be treated, that's telling, that's teaching directly character. Then there's something else called indirect empowerment, which is sort of embedding character values in a lesson. So teaching kids how they're going to get along and then giving them the opportunity to get along and use those skills. What he says in his theory is that direct teaching, if you just try to teach character by telling people what's expected of them, all you're doing is building their intelligence. That character is actually something that's developed on the inside of us. We have to engage in the activity and the experience in order to have it transform us. Just getting the information makes us smarter, but it doesn't actually make us develop character. So what I did is I developed, with transformative teaching, a framework where I use both. Where we teach kids directly, treat others the way you want to be treated, respect each other, respect yourself. But then we also embed those messages in the lesson plans, and we use the content to make those messages clear. and also give kids a chance to use what they're learning. So the basics of transformative teaching at simplest form. Step 1, transformative teaching begins with giving students a tool, which is the content. Step 2, teaching them how to use the tool, which is a skill or skill understanding. And step 3 is to give students a purpose or a mission to carry out using the new skill. The example that I have for that is like teaching kids to build a birdhouse. And you give them a hammer and nails and wood. And you teach them how to use the hammer and the nails. You have to watch your fingers, because if not, you'll hit, all the little details about it. Then you have them build the birdhouse, okay? What will happen, let's see. What will happen when you give a child this experience is that they will build something. And in the end, if we give them a test that says, how do you use a hammer and nails? That's easy. That's second nature. They learned that, and they learned it on the way to doing something else. They've actually learned how to build a birdhouse. So, setting the stage with intellectual experiences. This is how I frame each lesson around how the content can be applied. So if we're learning multiplication, which is one of the units that I'm going to present, then how is that multiplication applicable in the real world? How will kids actually be using the multiplication? And then giving them an experience where they actually get to use it. Students use their new intelligence to create or invent something, help someone, solve a problem, fight for a cause, teach someone, make an intellectual choice, apply skill in a role play, or play a game. When students become involved in an intellectual experience, students enter the transformation zone. And this is the zone that students actually begin to experience some sort of change on the inside because of what they're experiencing and what they're learning. So the big question is, how do we measure character? Whenever we start talking about character, no matter where you're at, articles that I've read, there's always this one piece that says, but wait a minute, we can't do it in the school system until we figure out how to measure it. So I've proposed that we measure student learning beyond the learning, which is transformative learning, and in other words, learning beyond the curriculum. So the curriculum is the particular content that kids have to learn. Well, what they leave the class remembering, that's what they actually learn. That's their learning beyond the learning. So we measure that using 4 categories. Learning beyond the curriculum categories are greater meaning, if the student develops greater meaning from the content. If they develop an application understanding, like they get in the grocery store with their mom and they're like, Mom, I learned about this in school, you should do this or that. Associations beyond the subject, if they're associating, hey, we read about that in a story yesterday during reading time, that's an association that's beyond what they have to know. And developed opinion. They walk out of the classroom going, man, I'm never going to treat anyone like that. It's when it actually affects who they are. What they've learned affects who they are. So what I did is I designed my unit, I did with Clinton Elementary School, using these 4 categories. And every single lesson had to include these 4 categories. So in order to include opinion, I would have to give the kid a choice. They have to make a choice on something where it's not right or wrong, it's their opinion. There has to be an experience where they apply the subject. There has to be an opportunity for them to discuss what they're learning, for them to develop their own greater meaning. And then there has to be an opportunity for them to associate that subject with another subject. And that can easily be embedded into a lesson. In order to measure transformative learning, we always need numbers. And so what I developed is a rubric for how to score, how to measure student learning, student transformative learning. The MASAPO, these are the 4 categories: meaning, association, application, and opinion, okay? In each of these categories, kids can develop one of these cognitions, or all. Metacognition, which is their understanding of themselves, their understanding of their abilities, their growth. Intellectual cognition, which is just their intellectual understanding of the subject. And then connective cognition, which is how they remember their experience, how they understand the experience and how it connects to the subject. So for all student comments, use this rubric to score them. And students receive 25 points for each category where they had one of these cognitions or more that was met. And that was basically because with the 4 categories, it ends up being 100%, and all the schools' basic grading is always out of 100%. So I wanted to have the numbers so that we could compare it to learning scores, and also compare it to how many opportunities for development were actually built into that lesson. Okay, so using the transformative learning rubric, we use the tests, the quizzes, class assignments, and homework. That is all the learning score, okay, and that's represented here. This is the learning score. So this is what each student received for a score on the assignment, whether they got it right or wrong and how many they got right. Then we have these categories, which is, again, the meaning, association, application, and opinion. And within those categories, which kind of cognitions were developed. And so for this information, I used the teacher observation forms, surveys, students writing assignments, reflection discussions, and basically applied what they said to the rubric to give them a score. So here is the transformative learning score, okay? And the way that I show it is like this one, the first one, 100 out of 100. The 100 denominator means that there were opportunities for students to develop all 4 categories. Say you do a lesson, say I do a lesson and I don't include the opportunity for kids to make a choice. Then they don't have the ability to develop opinion. I can't demand that of them. So in that case, the bottom number would only be 75%. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So for this kid right here, he in the area of association, he didn't have a comment that showed that that's what he developed. So for this, he didn't get any. There's no cognition represented. And then the chart above is just sort of a way for me to graph how each kid developed that cognition, like what was the highest level for. So for this first lesson, 100% of the students developed intellectual cognition in application. That means that this lesson made it clear how multiplication is applied. It's this one, the red line, peak up there. Help them to understand how multiplication would be applied in the real world. So that's how that works. The cooperation multiplication unit is the one that I did at Clinton Elementary School. The unit was designed to meet the MS-80 49 curriculum requirements. Each lesson was designed to include all 4 transformative learning categories. And each lesson includes an intellectual experience where students apply their learning to achieve a greater purpose. Okay, so for the unit intellectual experiences, and I'm actually gonna